My name is Walter. I'm 62. I'm a widower, the founder of a tech company here in Seattle, and for a long time I believed I was doing everything right. But tell me something. What would you do if you found out that your own daughter was preparing a coup against you behind your back? Because that's exactly what happened to me. I raised my daughter with all the best I could offer: education, opportunities, love. I thought I was building a legacy for her. But on an ordinary evening, on the way to a family dinner, my cell phone vibrated with a message from my lawyer. 5 words. Call me right away. It is urgent. The minute I read that, my heart tightened. What could be so serious? I still didn't know. But that call would change everything. It would tear me off the ground. If you've ever suspected that something wasn't right inside your own home, if you've ever felt that the silence of a child hid a plan, then you will understand every word of this story. Because by the end of this video, you'll find out how far the ambition of the one we love the most goes, and what happens when a parent decides not to shut up. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know something. Not all of life's scams come from strangers. Sometimes they dress the face of the one you love the most. Because that's what happened to me. My daughter, Amanda, filed a court order to declare me mentally incompetent. She wanted to take from me what I had built for 3 decades: my company, my legacy, my history. She did it behind her back, silently, while she still served me dinner and called me Dad with a smile on her face. But what she didn't know, it's just that I still had letters saved, evidence, buried truths, and a memory that does not forget what ingratitude is. I'll tell you everything, but if this story has ever touched any part of your heart, if you feel like it could be yours, I ask in all humility, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and stay with me until the end. Not as someone who just watches, but as someone who holds the hand of someone who is reopening an old wound. Because today, more than telling, I need to be heard. The drive to Bellevue was short, but my heart seemed to be miles away. The road was damp after the afternoon rain, and the city had that smell of wet asphalt mixed with nostalgia. When I parked in front of Amanda's house, there was still a shred of hope inside me. Maybe it was just Robert's exaggeration. Maybe there was some misunderstanding. After all, she was my daughter, my blood, my heiress. Sophie opened the door before I could even ring the doorbell. She ran to me with her arms outstretched, calling me Grandpa, with that pure joy that only children can have. I hugged her tightly. For a moment the world became lighter, but it was only for a moment. When I looked up, I saw Amanda standing on the doorstep, smiling like that measured smile, precise, a smile that seemed rehearsed. "Dad, I'm glad you came. The time is right." The tone was welcoming, but something inside me retracted. She hugged me quickly, and I felt that distance that didn't come from the body, it came from the soul. The house smelled of Elaine's favorite recipe, roasted chicken with herbs and brown potatoes. It was a tradition. Amanda knew. I knew exactly what that smell aroused in me. Memories of family together, Sundays on the balcony, laughter from Elaine cutting the breeze. But now, at that dinner, the aroma was mixed with something I couldn't name. Perhaps it was falsehood. Brian was in the kitchen setting the table. "Good evening, Walter. It's good to see you." He shook my hand longer than necessary, as if trying to convey security or hide nervousness. His hand was sweating. "Do you want a wine? Something stronger?" he asked. "Wine is good," I replied, already watching how Amanda moved around the kitchen, rapid, objective, as if he were conducting a presentation, not a family dinner. Her every step seemed calculated, each sentence strategically rehearsed. Sophie jumped around the desk excitedly, showing me a drawing, the 2 of us in the company office, her sitting in my leather chair. "Look, Grandpa, that's me in your place." I smiled. "You're beautiful, my little one. One day, maybe it will be." Amanda gave a quick, almost imperceptible glance when she heard this. "She spent the whole day saying she wanted to visit the office again," Brian said, forcing lightness in his voice. I think she likes that environment. It's because it looks like a spaceship, Sophie replied, laughing, and I laughed too, because there was something true. That child was the only truth at that dinner. Amanda turned around with a hot platter in her hands. Dad, you look tired. Is everything okay with your health? Are you sleeping well? I'm as I've always been. The work keeps me going. Maybe you should slow down, she said, as she served the chicken with almost surgical precision. And how are the company's finances? I asked. Her spoon stopped in midair for half a second. Not today, Dad. Let's leave work aside. The night is for family. Since when? Amanda has always been the type who wanted to discuss financial balance, even between one bite and another. But now, avoiding the subject seemed like the rule. Family is sacred, she said, with an almost philosophical smile. Just like loyalty, I returned. Silence. Brian cleared his throat. Sophie was talking about art classes. Brian, about a new project at the architecture firm. Amanda asked too many questions about my routine, my schedule, how I was feeling. Each word seemed to me carefully placed, as if she were filling out an invisible form. And it was then, in the middle of all that theatre, that a feeling hit me that I still didn't have the courage to accept. That wasn't worry. It was preparation. No, there is a moment in life when we stop listening to what people say and begins to listen to what they hide. That night was full of words, but their silence screamed. Let me pause here and ask you, have you ever been to a place where everything seemed too right, where everyone smiled, but did your heart warn you that something was wrong? If you've ever felt this, comment below with, I've lived it. Because only those who pass by understand this silence that hurts more than any scream. By the time dinner was over, it was past 8. Sophie pulled me by the hand to see the drawings in the room. Amanda walked me down the hall and, with a suppressed smile, said, Dad, thanks for coming. It means a lot. I thank you too, I replied, for showing me exactly what I needed to see. She froze for a second but regained her smile. Drive carefully. The road is wet. Yes, I will, Amanda. I've always been careful. I just didn't imagine it would need to be inside their own house. I left there with a heavy heart, but a clearer head. That night confirmed everything Robert had told me, and the worst, showed me that betrayal had been on the table for a long time. I just didn't want to see it. But now I saw it, and a question began to hammer inside me, like a dull drum deep in my chest. If she was able to stage all that so calmly, what else was my daughter hiding from me? I went back to the car with that suffocating silence in my chest. I started the engine, but I didn't move from the place. I left my hands on the wheel, trying to digest what had just happened at that dinner. That was not a family meal. It was a rehearsal. A perfect staging, and I was the only one who still believed in the old script. The cell phone vibrated on the console. 3 missed calls from Robert, my lawyer for more than 20 years. When someone like him calls insistently at that time of night, something is out of place. I picked up the phone, took a deep breath, and returned the call. Robert, talk to me. On the other side, the silence lasted a second longer than it should have. And then he said, Walter, Amanda filed a request for interdiction. She wants to declare you mentally unfit to continue leading the company. For a moment I didn't understand. My brain rejected the phrase as if it were a translation error. What's it like? He repeated. Slowly, each word seemed heavier than the last. She gathered documents, reports, even an opinion from a general practitioner who alleges signs of emotional instability. It says that you are not in a position to continue as CEO of WT Systems. I laughed, but it was that dry laugh of those who feel the pain rise from a place they didn't even know existed. Is she saying I'm crazy? In legal language, it is softer, but the effect is the same, Walter. She wants to take you out of control, and he got partial support from the council. I closed my eyes. His head was spinning. I remembered Amanda's look at the door when she thanked me for coming. Dinner, Elaine's chicken, questions about my health. It all made sense now. She was putting together a dossier, collecting speeches, gestures, silences, transforming each of these things into evidence against me. "When is the hearing?" I asked, swallowing. "In 10 days, in King County." "Does she want to take over the whole company?" "In the petition, she asks only for temporary removal, for the safety of the company. But once that happens, you know how it works. She takes over, and they leave you aside until the end." I leaned my forehead against the window pane. The rain was falling again, thin, cold, almost as if the sky was ashamed to cry loudly. "And the council? Who's with her?" "3 names so far. What worries me is that they are big names. The others are still neutral, but if she gets 2 more, she closes the majority. Did she prepare this herself?" "No, Walter. She has a strong team of lawyers behind her, and as far as I know, she herself is paying for everything with the company's money." That went through me like a knife. My daughter, using the dead mother's name, the family legacy, the company's resources, to knock me down. I gave her everything: time, studies, confidence. When Elaine left, Amanda was my only focus. I spent sleepless nights preparing her to lead, to continue what I built with my hands. And now she turned her back on me, not with shouting, not with fighting, but with letterhead and cold signature. Robert still tried to continue. "Walter, we have to prepare. Tomorrow morning you need to send me documents, exams, anything that proves your stability, and we need to talk to the counselors to show that this is an abuse." But my mind was already elsewhere, at the door of her house. That roast chicken, in Sophie's smile. Because that's what hurt the most. She betrayed me by smiling. He did everything delicately, politely, like someone offering poison inside a crystal cup. I hung up the call. The car fell silent. I stood there, on Rainier Avenue, watching the cars go by, each one going somewhere, and while I stood there, with the feeling that I had no more ground. But one thing was clear to me that night. Amanda had declared war. And she thought I wouldn't have the strength to react. But what she forgot, it's just that I'm the man who raised this company from nothing, who built an empire with her hands while she was still learning to write. And that, contrary to what she thinks, my memory is still perfect. And now, she forced me to wear it. The only question that hammered in my mind was, what else would she be able to do? To tear me out of the very story I wrote. When I got home, the first thing I did was lock the door to my office. The house was dark, only the streetlight filtering through the cracks in the curtain. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't take off my coat. I sat in the armchair without the strength to even take a deep breath. The silence of the house was heavy, and I felt the echo of everything I had lost, and everything I could lose from then on. After a few minutes there, looking at nothing, I got up. I walked to the safe that was behind the bookshelf. The combination was still the same as when Elaine was alive. 12/08/83, the date of our wedding. I turned the numbers slowly, like someone trying to open a wound without making a sound. The metallic click sounded like a whisper of memory. Inside, everything was as I left it. Her letters, the newspaper clippings from the first reports about the company, the photos of the little Amanda. I took one of the letters. It was from the time when Elaine was undergoing chemotherapy. The handwriting was shaky but firm. "Walter, if one day I leave early, take care of our daughter as you always have. She's going to need her floor." Cried. No fuss. I just let the tear come down. Because at that moment, I didn't know if it was still someone's floor. I took an old box with papers from the first contracts I signed, even when the company operated in the back of the garage. I remembered the nights I slept in front of the computer, smelling of cold coffee and anxiety. I remembered when I sold my old car to pay the first employee. I remembered when I bought my first suit to look trustworthy in meetings. All this, for what? To be dismissed as a crazy inconvenience. I leaned my head against the closet and looked at the corner of the room. Sophie's crib was still there, disassembled but in one piece. I was the one who assembled that crib with my hands, right after her birth. I spent afternoons sanding the wood, painting it with varnish, just to make sure it had a safe place when it came to visit me. Amanda said it was an exaggeration, but I thought it was love. So many times I heard from her that I was too old, too emotional. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's my mistake. Having loved too much, believed too much, protected too much. What hurts me is not the request for interdiction. It's the fact that she planned it without looking me in the eye. To have given me that dinner with the same smell as his mother, knowing that the next morning I would be signing my name as Incapable. I saw, hanging on the wall, the Seattle Chamber of Commerce Award, Entrepreneur of the Year 2004. I remembered the speech I gave that night. He said that everything he did was thinking about Amanda, that she was my reason to wake up early, sleep late, and start again the next day. Applause, pictures, pride, and today, that seemed like a hanging irony. I went to the window. The street was empty. The lights of the city shone far away, cold, impersonal, as if the world continues the same way, even when our world collapses from within. In the midst of all that, only one question hammered into my head. At what point did my daughter stop seeing me as a father and started to see me as an obstacle? I wondered if Elaine, wherever she was, could see all this. He would feel that he failed, or that I failed. If he would still think that I am the ground. The hurt began to turn into something else. First it was sadness, then anger, after clarity. Because it was at that moment, in that dark room, surrounded by evidence of how much I loved, built and resisted, that a new certainty began to be born within me. If she wanted silent war, she would have it, but in my own way. Take it easy, with truth, with every vivid memory I still carried with me. And I was going to show Amanda, and anyone who doubted it, that you don't destroy the root of a tree, just because it has already borne fruit. But the question that kept me up at night was another. What exactly had she said about me to convince half of the council that I no longer deserved the place I built with my own hands? The next morning, as soon as the sun had touched the living room windows, the cell phone vibrated with a message from Robert. I sent the documents. Read it calmly. I opened the email and the files started loading, one by one. First, the official petition. There it was. In cold, impersonal letters, Amanda Hansen requests the temporary interdiction of Walter Thomas Hansen, her father, founder and current CEO of WT Systems, for alleged signs of cognitive and emotional impairment. Supposed. The word hurt me more than any definitive sentence. I read everything slowly, as if discovering little by little that he was stabbed by someone he loved, and that he did it without haste. She said that my behavior after Elaine's death had become erratic, that I made impulsive decisions without strategic analysis, that he talked too much in meetings, that he lost focus, that he exposed the company to risks. Soon that I have always been meticulous with every step. Soon who raised that company out of nowhere, with the patience of someone who knows that time builds more than haste. I scrolled the screen. The next folder had the emails, copies of exchanges between Amanda and some of the company's most senior directors, messages with a respectful tone, but full of insinuations. My father has been going through a difficult time since Mom passed away. I think it would be prudent to talk about a possible transition of command. Prudent. The coldness of each word chilled me inside. She said she cared about my health, that she wanted the best for me, while undermining my credibility with every sentence. I used my pain as an argument, and the grief that consumed me became, in her hands, a chess piece. In another message, she attached an edited excerpt from a meeting. There I was, talking passionately about maintaining the company's older employee support programs. It was a project that I had defended for years. But she cut my speech in a way that sounded like emotional uncontrollability. He exalted himself, as he has done lately. Exalted? I fought my whole life to keep my tone firm, but human. I've always been intense, yes, but never out of control. Then came the final part, Amanda's proposal for the future of the company, a document entitled WT Systems, Towards the New Era. There, she proposed cutting 20% of operational positions, decrease benefits, reduce social investments, and to go public with the support of outside investors, including groups that I had already refused in the past, knowing that they had no commitment to our values. She wanted to turn the page, pull out the roots, and write the company's history without me, as if I were a dusty page of an old book. I closed the computer slowly. His heart was still beating strongly, but now, along with the pain, there was a new sensation, lucidity. She did not act on impulse. That was not a moment of weakness. It was a plan, cold, deliberate, executed with precision. The Amanda who wrote those words was not my daughter. She was a trained, sharp executive and dangerous. She used every meeting we had, every word I spoke, every silence as ammunition. It reduced me to an obstacle, and that for me was the cruelest, because a parent can endure ingratitude, but to be treated as an obstacle, as dead weight, it breaks our soul in a way that we can't explain. I'm here opening my heart, telling my story with all the courage I have left. If you are there listening, feeling what I felt, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. I still have a lot of things in store to tell you. Things that hurt, but that need to be said. Because what's next? It's the part where my soul almost gave way. Because after reading all that, I asked myself, was the love I gave worth anything? Or had she already erased me from my heart a long time ago? Those were days when time seemed not to pass. I hung up the phone, cancelled meetings, asked Robert to keep me informed only in case of emergency. I walked away from the office and myself. I woke up, drank the almost cold coffee that I myself forgot in the corner of the desk, and returned to the office armchair. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't listen to the radio. I just stood there, looking out the window, trying to understand how everything had gotten here. The house, so full in Elaine's time, now seemed like a place that echoed empty. Every step of mine seemed louder. Each silence lasted longer. I reread her letters, as if looking for answers hidden between lines written with love. There was one that she wrote when Amanda went to business school. "Walter, you made her a leader. Now you need to help her remain human." I wondered if I failed on this second point. Could it be that, in my eagerness to prepare her for the world, I forgot to teach her to take care of where she came from? Have I made her a strong woman, but cold? I spent hours with this question hammering in my head, until one of those days I called Amanda. I left a message. No response. Neither hers nor Brian's. Not even a message saying she was busy. Their silence spoke more than any fight. I went to the kitchen, looked at the empty pots. I made a tasteless pasta, not because I didn't know how to cook, but because it had no taste when the soul of the people was bitter. At night, I sat on the couch and watched a report on a local channel. Sources indicate imminent change in WT Systems leadership. Rumors point to a transition in the coming weeks. They did not name names, but I knew. It was my name that they were burying in silence. I felt ashamed, humiliated. I imagined my employees seeing that, my partners for years, reading and concluding that maybe I was really unstable. The public image was all I had maintained with effort, and now, because of my daughter, I was being stained. But what hurt the most at that moment was the feeling of being invisible, ignored, as if I had already left and no one had noticed. For the first time, I looked at my own history and asked myself, am I fighting against something that is already lost? Has the world changed so much that there is no more room for men like me? Loneliness is treacherous. She doesn't scream, she whispers, and in those whispers she tries to convince you to give up. I found myself there, with awards on the wall and chest pains, wondering if maybe it was time to stop, to leave everything in her hands and disappear with some dignity. But then, before going to sleep, I passed by Sophie's room. That dismantled crib, leaning against the corner, reminded me of an old promise: to never become an old man who runs away. Because it's not just about me. It's about what I stand for, about what I built, and mainly about what she tried to erase. That night in the dark of my living room, between Elaine's letters and the noise of my own tiredness, I made a decision. It wouldn't be Amanda who would tell my story. But what I didn't know yet was that in order to win this battle, I would have to dig up truths that no one was ready to hear, truths that even I didn't want to face. And the first, it was much closer than I imagined. The next morning, after another sleepless night, I returned to the safe. I had read those letters so many times that I could recite them by heart. But that day, one of them seemed to shine brightest among the others. I took it with trembling hands, feeling the paper already yellowed with the marks of time, and read in a low voice, "Walter, if one day the world tries to take away everything we have built together, remember, you are stronger than you think. Don't let them take everything." It was by Elaine, written months before leaving, and it was as if she was there with me, whispering in my ear. At that moment I felt my chest fill with something I hadn't felt in a while: firmness. There was still anger, of course, sadness too, but above all a type of force was born there that only those who have lost everything know. I got up slowly, picked up the phone and dialed Robert. He answered quickly. "Robert, we will fight." He was silent for 2 seconds. "That's what I wanted to hear." His tone changed. I could tell that even he was already thinking that I had given up. But no, I just needed time to remember who I was. And now I remembered. We started that same day. First, he advised me to do a battery of tests. Not just any evaluation, but with independent, recognized experts who could attest not only to my sanity, but to my ability to continue leading the company. I scheduled with 2 neurologists, a psychiatrist, and even a clinical geriatrician. I wanted to cover all the flanks. Then I asked him to do a thorough survey of the latest financial reports that I had signed myself. In the previous 3 quarters, the company had had solid growth. In fact, decisions that I had personally made, such as the diversification of contracts with startups, were crucial to avoid a greater hit to revenues. Amanda was trying to rewrite history as if it were the other way around. But the numbers, when well shown, do not lie. And there's one thing I've learned from life: time can erase a lot, but facts have a wonderful stubbornness in surviving. I also made a list, name by name. From old employees, directors who saw my routine, close friends, and even external partners who followed my recent performance. It would not be just a legal defense. It would be a moral defense, a reconstruction of my dignity, point by point. And there's a phrase I need to tell you here, looking deep into your eyes, even if you're on the other side of the screen. If you think this story has moved you so far, wait only until what comes next, because it is up front that everything will come. I promise, but going back, Robert began to organize the defense. We created a dossier with facts, with evidence, with true words. While Amanda acted with smiles, I prepared a mirror that would show who she really was behind the pose of modernity. And the more I immersed myself in these documents, in these memories, in these letters, but I understood. This fight was not just for me. It was for every parent who has been left aside, for every old worker who was called outdated, for every man he loved in silence, and it was discarded as if it were a burden. Amanda thought I was just a name on a chair, but I was the foundation, and when you try to pull out a foundation, the whole house trembles. The hardest part was looking at her portrait in the living room picture frame and not feeling only love. It hurts when love becomes memory, and the hurt becomes present. But even so, I was going to fight, with class, with respect, but firmly. And when Robert sent me the first version of our response, I read it in silence, down to the last line. There was everything: truth, dignity, history, and a sentence that closed the document. He who builds with honor cannot be overthrown by ambition. I took a deep breath. I looked up, and for the first time since that dinner, I felt upright. But there was still one detail missing: a name, a piece that, when put in place, could change the entire game. And this piece, it was Brian. What did he know, and why was he still silent? On that rainy Friday, I grabbed my thick coat, got in the car, and drove to Tacoma. It was there that Raymond, my old friend, my brother on the journey, co-founder of WT Systems, lived. He was always more reserved. After he retired, he disappeared from the radar, not out of hurt, but by choice. He said he wanted silence after a life full of decisions. But in that moment, I needed his presence more than ever. And if there's one thing that time teaches you, it's to value those who walked with you from the beginning. I arrived at his simple house, surrounded by low trees and an unkempt garden. I rang the bell. When the door opened, and I saw that wrinkled face, but still full of sparkle in my eyes, I felt something good in my chest. "Walter," he said with surprise, "I heard that the world was turning backwards, but I didn't imagine that you would knock on my door." We went in, drank bitter coffee, and I told them everything, every detail. He listened to me in silence. He only moved his eyes, frowned from time to time. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and let out a long sigh. She came to me. My heart froze. "Amanda?" I asked. He nodded. "It's been about 20 days. He said he was putting together a new proposal for the future of the company, that you needed to rest, that I should support her in the council vote. In return, she offered shares. She said that if I supported it, she would guarantee a participation for my family." I felt the blood boiling inside. Amanda was trying to buy into the names that still respected the company's history, but Raymond smiled sideways. I refused. I didn't build that to see it become an auction ground. I know you, Walter. You may be tired, but you've never been weak. And she still doesn't understand that respect can't be bought. I was silent for a while. I just looked at him, and for the first time in many days, I felt that I was not alone. Together, we took pen and paper. We listed the board members name by name. We identified who still had appreciation for the past, who valued the years of construction, not just the growth charts. Raymond also told me something else. She is holding meetings with 2 investment funds in New York, promising a 30% return in the first year. It's a lie, Walter. Those guys will suck the company in and throw it in the trash later. He was right, I knew it. That was not just an attempt to seize power. It was an attack on the soul of the company. And there, sitting in my old friend's living room, with the smell of coffee and wind coming through the cracks in the window, I realized that my struggle was bigger than me. It was for everyone who believed in WT as something more than money. As I left his house, the Tacoma sky was gray, but inside me there was something I hadn't felt in a long time: direction. On the way back, I stopped at the cemetery. The rain was falling thinly, and the leaves were sticking to my boots. I walked to Elaine's tombstone, that simple stone, with our last name engraved in firm letters. I knelt there as I did on birthdays and important dates, but this time I didn't say much. I was just silent, and after a while I whispered, "I'm trying, baby. I'm trying not to let them erase what we've built." The wind blew lightly, and I really felt as if she were listening to me. No. There are times when we realize that even when all seems lost, there's always someone, even if it's who still believes in you, and sometimes that's all we need to keep from falling. If you've ever felt this, if you've experienced something similar, comment below with a simple, "I know how it is." Because deep down, there are pains that only those who have lived it understand. I returned home with the list in hand, with my eyes steadier and my head working like in the old days. But there was still one piece on this board that needed to move. And she was closer than ever, because the next morning, the one who showed up at my door, with his eyes downcast and his soul heavy, was Brian himself. And what he had to say, it would change everything. Brian arrived early. He didn't warn. He didn't send a message. It just showed up. I opened the door and saw that tall man, with his hands tucked into his coat pockets and his eyes running away from mine. He seemed to have shrunk since I last saw him. "Can I come in?" he said, in a tone that sounded more like an apology than a greeting. I gave way without saying anything. We went straight to the office. He looked around, as if recognizing an ancient battlefield. She sat down slowly, and only after a few seconds she said, "I'm not here to defend Amanda, but there are things you need to know." I sat in the front seat, arms crossed. "Then speak." He took a deep breath. "She's obsessed, Walter. He thinks that you will take the company to the bottom, that everything he believes to be the future will end. But not only that, she is afraid. Fear of not being enough, not to get out of his shadow. That hit me in a strange way. Because deep down, I always knew. Amanda grew up with the pressure of being the heiress, and maybe at some point he confused collection with love. But Brian hadn't come just to talk about feelings. He took an envelope out of his pocket and handed it to me. "You need to see this." Inside, there were copies of statements, spreadsheets, transfer receipts. Amanda had moved almost $500,000 from the company's account. Money destined for marketing and innovation. Relocated without approval to a private fund in her name. She used this money to pay consultants, lawyers, buy support. It's setting up the takeover as a private project. My stomach turned. It was no longer just emotional betrayal. It was a crime, deviation of appeal, breach of legal trust. "How did you get that?" I asked. "I saw her sending the emails. I saw the receipts. I worked on the spreadsheet with her, and I saved everything, because deep down, I knew it was going to go wrong." "And why only now, Brian?" He lowered his eyes. "Because I'm a coward, Walter. I respect you, but I was in the middle of a war that I didn't choose. Only now, I see that being silent is worse. And if I didn't do anything, I would be an accomplice." I took the papers and stared. My head was boiling, but my body was calm. For the first time in weeks, I had something concrete in my hands. A mistake of hers. A cross line. Now, it wasn't just about emotion. It was about law. I immediately called Robert. "I have documents. Amanda embezzled funds from the company. I need you to come now." In less than 2 hours, he was there, with his grey suit and briefcase always organized. When he saw the papers, his eyes narrowed. "This is serious, Walter. Serious. We can file an audit request, and that changes everything in the audience." But Robert wasn't done yet. He brought another piece of information. "And there's more. We did a survey on her lawyer, Sarah Klein. She has already been involved in 2 cases of family dispute. In both, she was accused of manipulating witnesses and forcing biased medical reports. She was never convicted, but the record is stained. That is, Amanda surrounded herself with people willing to do anything, but he also left traces. And there, in that office that saw the birth of my company, among papers, sorrows and truths, I saw the scales of justice begin to tip, not out of revenge, but out of necessity. I knew this information was a game changer, but I also knew that now, Amanda wasn't going to back down. She was going to squeeze even more. And maybe she would do something that would surpass even what I imagined. The question that kept hammering in my head that night was, how far would my daughter go, so as not to lose the throne that she herself tried to steal? The next morning, with the sun coming in timidly through the crack in the curtain, I sat at the table with all the papers scattered around. Evidence, extracts, testimonies. That was no longer just my defense. It was a reconstruction of the truth. I called Robert and asked him to come. When he arrived, he brought with him the serenity of someone who knows where he steps. We spent hours organizing each document, categorizing it by date, by name, by impact. In the center of the table, I placed a printed copy of the petition that Amanda had filed against me. Next to it, I placed the statements that proved the embezzlement of the $500,000, and on the other side, the information about her lawyer, Sarah Klein, with all the history of manipulation and misconduct in family disputes. "Let's go all out," I said, "but no rush, and without hatred." Robert agreed. "Let's go with truth." The first step was to formally request an external independent audit of the last 6 months of the company's movements. The request was filed based on clear indications of misuse of corporate funds and attempted fraud in the composition of the board. In parallel, he filed an internal complaint for ethical investigation, citing the use of lawyer Sarah, which could be considered an attempt to indirectly coerce witnesses. But I knew that, as much as the document spoke, my sanity needed to be shielded, so I agreed to have that medical evaluation. But I did more than that. I made appointments with 3 different specialists: a clinical psychiatrist, a functional neurologist, and a neuropsychiatrist from Harvard, Raymond's own recommendation, imaging, exams, interviews, cognitive tests. I did everything without complaining. Do you know why? Because I wasn't afraid of the truth. What hurt me was to see that someone I raised was so afraid of my presence that he tried to erase me with lies. With everything ready, I wrote a formal statement, a direct, elegant and firm text. I sent it to all board members, a copy to the legal and governance departments. I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I only informed, soon all the allegations made against me will be denied. With medical reports, financial documents and testimonies, the truth will be shown with respect. And I will respond accordingly, with evidence. I sent it in the late afternoon, and I waited. Amanda did not answer. No email, no link, not even one received. But I knew she had read it. I knew she felt the blow. Because sometimes silence is the noise of fear. The following days were marked by an invisible tension. People from the council started calling me, not to declare direct support, but to ask for clarification. I knew how to read between the lines. They were retreating. They wanted to see where the wind would blow, and I was there, standing, without raising my voice, showing who I was, and letting the actions speak for me. Deep down, this has always been my way. I never had to scream to be heard. I have always believed that firmness does not need scandal. And you know, if this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, help me carry it forward. Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. Because there is a story that is not only mine, it is from many people who have already been silenced, who have already been discredited. And yet he chose to remain standing. But even with all this in progress, with all the right steps being taken, I couldn't get one thing out of my head. Why hadn't Amanda confronted me directly? Did she know there was something bigger coming? Something that was not even in our hands yet? That day, I got up earlier than usual. I wore the dark grey suit that Elaine always said made me look like someone who ran the world without having to raise my voice. I took my old watch, a gift from her in our 25 years of marriage, put it on my wrist, adjusted my tie slowly, and I took a deep breath. It was time to return to WT Systems, not as a visitor, but as a founder. I entered the building and was greeted with a mixture of astonishment and embarrassment. Some employees looked away, others smiled embarrassedly. But everyone knew something was happening. I went straight up to the 25th floor where the board of directors was, and there, right in the glass hall that overlooked Seattle, I saw Amanda. From the back, talking to 2 executives as if he were in control of everything. She turned her body slowly as she noticed my presence, and in that instant, for a second, she wasn't the cold woman who had been signing emails against me. It was my daughter, the same one I carried in my arms to school on winter mornings. But that second one passed, and she returned to the role. Her tone was forced, too professional. "Dad, I didn't expect your visit today. Do you want to talk privately?" I looked her in the eyes. and with the calm of someone who has already been destroyed from the inside and chose not to descend to the level of the mud, I replied, "If you wanted the company, you could have talked to me. I didn't need to bury myself alive." The silence that followed was almost sacred. The two executives next to her seemed to be looking for somewhere to hide. She tried to maintain the pose, but his eyes faltered. Her pupil trembled. The breath ran out of the beat, because she knew I was there, whole, not as a victim, but as truth. She tried to change the subject. "If you want, we can schedule a more formal conversation with the lawyers." And I just replied, "Don't worry. I'm already talking to the lawyers, and with the numbers." I turned my back. I walked in silence, but wherever I went, there were eyes following me. Not to pity, but of respect, because sometimes a man's greatest strength is not in the scream. It is in not giving in to anger, even when everything inside him asks for justice. And you know, I need to tell you something now from the bottom of my heart. If you've made it this far, stay with me. It's because you feel like there's still something to come. And there really is, because what comes next is not just a reckoning. It is the revelation that changes everything. Everything I thought, everything I felt, everything I believed was true. The next door that opened, it made me see a side of Amanda that I had never seen before. Or maybe that I never wanted to see. It wasn't long after that day in the building for the dust to start kicking up outside the halls of the company. I woke up with the phone vibrating non-stop, and when I looked at the first notifications on my phone, I felt my stomach turn. They were in all the financial news portals, opinion columns, blogs specializing in technology, headlines in large letters. "Daughter tries to oust founding father for mental instability. Family conflict rocks Seattle tech giant. Generational feud could put WT systems at risk." In the beginning, I confess, my heart tightened. Not because of the exposure itself, but because of the shame. I have always been a discreet man. I never wanted the spotlight. And now, there I was, portrayed as the sick old man who needed to be removed. And Amanda as the modern, visionary heiress. But it was enough for the first coffee to finish straining that morning that things began to change. Robert called me soon after. His voice was different. "Do you see the repercussions?" "I am," I replied, "and I don't know if it's good or bad." He gave a brief laugh. "It's better than we expected. Read the reviews. Look at the emails." I opened my computer, logged into the company's old email account. There were dozens of messages. Retired employees, directors who passed through the company in the 90s and 2000s, even interns who worked with me one summer and were now graduated adults, all writing words that I never expected to read. "Walter, you were the one who taught me what ethics was. I'm with you. You have always been the heart of this company. Don't let them erase your story." I felt my hands tremble on the keyboard, but I kept reading. A letter marked me deeply. It was from a secretary on Amanda's team. She did not identify herself, but said that since Amanda informally took control, the climate has changed, that decisions were made in a hurry, without consultation, with arrogance, that she heard screams in closed-door meetings, and that many were afraid, but hoping that the truth would come out. That was more than support. It was light. It was dignity coming back, slowly. A week later, an anonymous petition was circulated among employees. They asked for Walter Thompson, founder, to remain as chairman of the board. A symbolic position, but one of honor. The document had hundreds of signatures. Secretly, some sent copies to me. Others left discreet notes in the parking lot of the headquarters. And that's when I understood. Even if Amanda had the legal structure, she didn't have people's hearts, because real respect, you don't inherit, you conquer. I stood there that morning, looking out the window, with a faint sun hitting the glass, and let a tear fall, not sadness, but of gratitude. You know, sometimes we think that time takes everything, but there are memories that never disappear. They are kept in silence until the right moment to bloom again. And look, if you also have a memory like this, the kind that marks, warms up, or even hurts, share it with me here in the comments. It can be a phrase, a name, a feeling. I'm going to read everything, because deep down, it is these memories that keep us going. And as I was trying to digest all of this, my phone rang again. It was Robert. His voice was deeper. "Walter, a new summons has arrived, and this time, she's playing dirty. Did Amanda cross another line, or will it be this time? Won't she be able to go back?" Robert's call brought me straight to the center of the hurricane. The subpoena wasn't really a surprise, but the content, this one got me right. Amanda had arranged for a new hearing to be hastily scheduled on the grounds of troubling new behavioral evidence on my part, all based on videos cut from meetings, excerpts of speeches out of context, and, lowest of all, a preliminary medical report commissioned by Sarah Klein, with a professional name I had never heard of. She had tightened the siege, but perhaps, by pressing too hard, she had made the mistake that would bring her down, because one of the documents she mistakenly included contained a copy of an internal email, a message exchanged with none other than James Leclerc. There, Amanda stated in no uncertain terms that she could adjust the Q3 numbers to ensure support in the next round of voting. That sentence, that phrase was gold. Fraud. Direct manipulation of the company's strategic information. Robert looked at me with wide eyes. She delivered her own poison. Now is the time. 2 days later, an extraordinary meeting was scheduled. Only the members of the executive committee, 7 chairs occupied by men and women who, over the years, have seen my beard turn white and my eyes become sunken. But they have also seen the building grow out of nowhere. Amanda arrived elegant, cold as always. Sarah Klein next to her, with her tablet and a black blazer that looked more like armor, but they didn't know what was coming. I waited for everyone to settle down. Robert plugged his laptop into the screen in the living room, and then I started talking, low, calm, as if knowing that the time has come. "Gentlemen, I did not come today to beg for respect. I came to present facts, and so I did. I designed the statement with the 500,000 embezzled, then the screenshots of her emails with executives, the list of meetings held with funds without authorization, and finally, the email to Leclerc. When the phrase appeared on the screen, 'I can adjust the Q3 numbers to ensure support,' there was an icy silence. Amanda tried to interrupt. It was misunderstood. It's a cutout." But no one listened, because at that moment, everyone was looking at James. He was there, in the corner of the room, pale. He ran his hand over his forehead. He got up slowly. "Amanda, did you lie to me?" She did not answer. He just looked at the ground. "Did you make me support this plan based on false information?" His voice was now different, a mixture of disgust and disappointment. And then, what no one expected happened. James turned to the committee and said, "In light of this, I formally request a re-evaluation of the company's interim leadership, and I propose that Mr. Walter Thompson resume his duties until the end of the audit process." Amanda tried to argue, but her voice failed. He stuttered. Sarah Klein tried to get up, but was cut off by Robert. "You are acting without a valid registration in Washington State. It has already been notified." And there, in that room where so many decisions had been made over the years, I saw for the first time Amanda shrink in her own chair. There were no screams. There was no argument. There was only the weight of truth. That goes down slowly, but when it arrives, it breaks what is fragile inside. I left the meeting with my heart pounding, but with a firm step. Outside, the hallway was empty, but inside me there was a whole sea in motion. I knew that battle was turning, but I also knew that Amanda had not yet said the last word. And when pride feels hurt, he often takes risks in the name of desperation. The question that hammered now was, what can a desperate daughter do when she realizes that the father she tried to bury, are you more alive than ever, On the way out of that meeting, when the heavy glass door closed behind me, I thought she was going to hide, that she was going to disappear for a few days, digest everything on her own, perhaps with her arrogance wounded and her head throbbing. But no. It only took 2 steps down the corridor and I heard behind me, "Dad, wait!" Her voice was not commanding. It was appealing. I turned slowly. Amanda was hurrying, her eyes moist, her heel echoing on the cold tiles of that floor where, years ago, she ran for the first time holding my finger. For a moment, that contrast hurt me, but I didn't back down. She stopped in front of me. The posture that was once haughty was now that of someone trying to pick up the pieces of what was left. "I didn't want it to be like that. I thought you were losing control, that you were letting yourself be carried away by emotion, by grief." Her voice cracked. She tried to justify, to seek meaning where there was no more. Everything I did was thinking about the company, into what WT could be. I thought you couldn't handle the pace. I wanted to protect it. I looked right into her eyes. There was no more anger in me, not even red-hot sorrow. There was a calm certainty which only time gives. "Amanda, you had it all, and then some. I gave you the best of me, and you chose to stab me in the back with a smile on your face." She shook her head in despair. "It wasn't betrayal, Dad. It was fear. I made a mistake, but—" I didn't let her finish. I took from the inside pocket of my jacket a letter, already yellowed, carefully folded. I put it in her hand. "Your mother wrote this before she left. She knew you, and I knew that one day, perhaps, you would need to read those words." Amanda opened it, trembling. I didn't read it together. I already knew every line, but her expression as she read changed. Confusion, silence, and finally, that look of someone who recognizes the hard truth that he has avoided all his life. The letter said, among other things, "Amanda, your father is intense, but he is stable. He carries the weight of the world on his shoulders as firmly as he held you in his arms. The problem was never that he didn't know how to lead. It was you not knowing how to wait." When she finished reading, she tried to speak, but I just took a step back. "Now, it's late." I turned my back and walked. I didn't run. I didn't cry. Every step was heavy, yes, but necessary. Because there comes a time in life when continuing to try to fix what the other made a point of breaking is the same as bleeding in vain. And you know the hardest. It's just that even with everything she did, part of me still wished she understood, that she would come back. But there are relationships that when they cross certain lines do not return. But fate, fate still had one more card up its sleeve. And what was about to happen? It was something neither Amanda nor I could have predicted. The days that followed that rupture were not noisy. No one knocked on the door. No one shouted in the corridors of the company. But the fall, the fall was silent and slow, like ice breaking beneath the feet of those who thought they were invincible. It began with a statement from the board. "All leadership transitions are suspended until further notice, under review of financial and ethical conduct." A short phrase, but one that echoed like a hammer behind the scenes. The same ones who had previously supported Amanda began to fall silent. Some have disappeared. Others began to respond with a "let's see" instead of "count on me." And then came the bombshell. Sarah Klein, that sharp and arrogant lawyer, received a formal complaint for unethical conduct. Direct accusation of manipulation of documents and coercion of witnesses in at least 2 previous family cases. One of them involved an 83-year-old lady, deceived into signing a full power of attorney. This was enough for the order to recommend her precautionary removal from all ongoing cases, including Amanda's. And that's when the castle began to crumble. Without Sarah, Amanda lost her shield, and with the financial investigations moving forward, she was advised by the very law firm that replaced her to step aside indefinitely from any executive role. What was once domination has turned into silence. What was once security has become isolation. Brian, the husband, tried to help. They told me that he insisted that she apologize, try to reverse it with dignity. But she couldn't. She was locked in her room, avoiding even little Sophie. For the first time, she seemed to understand the size of the hole she had thrown herself into. And, perhaps worse than that, he began to realize that he underestimated not only his father, but what it is to be a daughter, because being a daughter is not receiving an inheritance. It is honoring blood. It is knowing when to speak and when to listen. It is learning from those who came before, even if they do not agree with everything. Amanda ignored all of this, and now he picked up the pieces. I learned everything from third parties. I didn't look for it. I didn't knock on the door. I didn't send a message. And I'll confess, inside there was no joy, nor revenge. Just a calm sadness, as if watching the rain fall on a house that he built himself, and he saw someone destroy with his own hands. And you know, there are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. So if you're feeling this story hit any part of you, enjoy this video and subscribe. Let's make this story reach those who need it. Because sometimes, all a wounded heart needs is to know that it's not alone. And when I thought the silence would last, the news came. Amanda wanted to see me, not through lawyers, not by email, personally. What did she have to say now? After all, after the fall, after the letter from the mother? I accepted, but I didn't expect what would come in that conversation. And you won't wait either, because what Amanda revealed, it would change not only our history, it would change my whole life. It was on a cold Saturday afternoon that I heard the doorbell ring. I didn't expect anyone. My days were silent, and I confess that I had even gotten used to the sound of the empty house. When I opened the door, time stopped for a moment. There was Brian, with tired eyes and a suppressed smile, and next to him, Sophie, my granddaughter, the same one who hugged me on roast chicken nights, the one I put on my lap to show the stars through the attic telescope. I was more grown up, but the sparkle in his eye, it was the same. Before I could say anything, she opened her blue backpack and pulled out a folded paper. He held it out to me with both small hands, as if offering a secret. I made it for you, Grandpa. I unfolded slowly. It was a colorful drawing, one of those with crooked lines and full of heart around it. In the middle, two figures holding hands. On top, written with colored pencils, Mom and Grandpa at the company. My chest tightened. Their hands trembled as if they were carrying a reliquary. I looked at Sophie, knelt at her height and asked in a broken voice, "What did you mean by this drawing, my flower?" She bit her lip, thought for a moment and said, "I wish you would be friends again." He didn't know what to answer right away. I lowered my head, took a deep breath, and it was she who broke the silence again. "Do you still love Mommy?" Oh my God, how can such a simple question cut so deep? I lifted my face, lightly touched her face and said, "Always, my dear." Even when she forgot to love me. Brian, standing in the doorway, wiped his eyes discreetly. He came in, greeted me respectfully, and sat on the couch, while Sophie ran to the backyard to play with the dry leaves. We stood there in silence for a few minutes, until he said, "She's bad, Walter, really. You're digesting everything, crying in silence, not knowing how to start fixing it." I shook my head, listening but not overreacting. He continued, "I didn't come here to ask you to forgive or to reconnect. I just wanted you to know that she's trying to understand the size of the damage, and that Sophie still needs you." I looked at the drawing again, which was now on the living room table, and I realized that, even with everything, love still lived there. Wounded, yes, but alive. I thanked him. I did not ask for reconciliation, nor did I offer promises. I just thanked him. Because there are things that we don't force to happen. There is a feeling that only comes back if you are sincere and at the right time. And you know, sometimes the greatest freedom is not to forget what hurt us. It is to look at what we were. what we lived, and choose to continue with our whole heart. And look, if you've come this far with me, I need to tell you, the most delicate moment is yet to come. Because when the heart calms down, that's when the truth knocks on the door. And what Amanda revealed to me after that, it was something that not even in my worst or best dreams I would have imagined. Are you ready to listen? Because that last part, it's where everything changes. It was on a rainy Thursday morning that I received the proposal. Robert called me with that tone of his, dry, but with a hint of respect that he learned to give me over time. The new council deliberated. They want to keep you as chairman. Amanda can stay, but with a limited position. COO, under supervision. They want peace in the company, stability for the market. I was silent for a long time. He respected it. When I finally answered, I could only say, they think that stability comes with a signature, but stability, it comes from trust, and that, my dear, is not voted on in a meeting. But something inside me didn't deny it. It was a chance to finish this story without it becoming an eternal hole inside my granddaughter. 2 days later, Amanda asked to meet me. No office, no formality. She suggested a place that, I confess, caught me off guard. The Pike Place Market. The same where years ago I took her on Sundays to see the fish jumping and the stalls full of flowers. The same place where she looked at me one day, at the age of 6, and said she wanted to be the boss of something. I went. For me, for her, for Sophie. She was waiting for me in a quieter corner near a caramel apple stand. It was different. Tired, sunken eyes, but no makeup, seemed real, no masks. He didn't hug me, he didn't even try to smile. He only held out a letter. I wrote it so as not to stumble over words, he said. I sat on a wooden bench and opened it. It was a short letter, direct. Dad, I made a mistake, not because of the plan, because I still think the company needed to change, but I was wrong to not trust you, for forgetting who taught me to love this company. Because I thought I could cut the noose that brought me here and still stand up. I don't want forgiveness now. I just want that, if one day it is possible, we rebuild. I closed the paper. I held on tight. I looked at her and said, you know, Amanda, trust is not asked. It is built, brick by brick, and each one of them takes time, sweat, and truth. She nodded, without retorting. For the first time, she listened to me with the silence of someone who understands that she needs to learn. I got up slowly, put the letter in my pocket and said, we can start slowly, a transition. You observe, learn again. But now, under my gaze, no gimmicks, no backstage. She nodded. He didn't ask for anything else. And maybe, just maybe, this was the first moment in years that I saw my daughter as she was, without the title, without the pride, without the shield. Only Amanda. I left there feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. It was not happiness. It was not full reconciliation, but it was the beginning of a new bridge. And when I got home, I sat in the armchair in the office, with the letter still in my hands. I thought, maybe some stories won't end in war. Perhaps they will end in reconstruction. But does everyone really want to start over? Or do some still have hidden cards even when the game seems to be over? Because that same night, I received an anonymous email. And what was there? It can change everything again. The next morning, after a bad night's sleep with that email still hammering in my head, I decided to do something I'd been putting off for weeks. I returned to my old office, the one that was in the highest corner of the headquarters, on the floor where it all began. It was under renovation, of course. They wanted to modernize, open up space, put glass in place of wooden shelves. These things that the new ones call innovation. But I asked the team to leave that space for last. It wasn't attachment, it was respect. When I opened the door, I smelled the smell of fresh paint mixed with the old perfume of the leather of the armchairs that still resisted there. The walls were peeling in some corners, but on top of the shelf there were still the photos. The first employees, the opening ceremony of WT Systems, and in the center the portrait of Elaine, my life partner, with that smile that always made me breathe deeper. I sat in the old chair, the same one that creaks when it leans back. It was like sitting in time. I looked out the window and saw all of Seattle breathing outside. So much happened down there, and I was there, looking from above, without haste, without pain, just with a quiet lump in my throat. I almost lost everything, for too much love, for trusting too much, or maybe for not knowing how to teach in time that love also imposes limits. I stood there in silence, just listening to the sounds of the city coming through the cracks. The wall clock still worked. The lights of the Space Needle Tower flickered in the distance, as if reminding me of who I was, where I came from. No, there is a time in life when guilt, pride, silence, all this turns to dust on the edge of what really matters. Because I didn't fight just to keep my position. I fought against a part of me that wanted to give up. I fought against the idea that to be old is to be disposable. I struggled to remember who I was, and now, sitting there in that dusty office, I understood. I didn't just win a case. I gained time. Time to teach, if you still want to listen. Time to feel, even if it hurts. Time to move on, even if alone. That's when the cell phone vibrated. A new message, with no saved sender. Just one line. You need to see what's in that link. It's about Amanda. I felt my stomach turn. Clicked. The page loaded slowly, and when the content appeared, I froze. Because at that moment, I discovered that the story I thought was ending. There was still one last truth to be unearthed. And that truth, I swear, could change everything you thought you knew until now. Are you ready to listen? Because that last part, it will make you see everything with different eyes. I looked at that screen with the link open and took a deep breath. It was a report, coming from a former employee of Amanda's team. Here was the full truth. She hesitated. When the board voted on the restructuring, it could have contested, fought, played dirty again. But no, she was silent, accepted. And more than that, he made her silence an act of respect. That for me was the end of the war. Because I didn't want a daughter on her knees, I wanted a woman capable of understanding that love is not conquered. It is taken care of. Today, months later, WT Systems is still standing. Yes, it has changed, evolved. Amanda continues as COO, now for real. He knows how to listen, and I, as chairman, am more present than ever. Not for the position, but for the purpose. Sophie comes to visit me on Saturdays. It brings drawings, stories from the school. She looks at me with clean eyes, as if she knows that the adult world can be hard, but that Grandpa's love is a safe ground. Amanda and I exchanged messages. Sometimes we have lunch together. We are still not like before, but there is respect. And where there is respect, something good can blossom again. Today I understand that it is not success that builds a family. It is presence. It is the silence in which we choose not to hurt. It's the word we choose not to let go. And if I can leave something for those who have accompanied me so far, it's this. To love is to teach. It is to correct. It is sometimes moving away so that the other learns to come back. And if you've given everything for a son or daughter and felt betrayed, I just want to tell you, you're not alone. Justice does not always come with fanfare. Sometimes it comes in the silence of a signature, in the firmness of an absence, in the choice not to give in to what diminishes us. Thank you from the heart for having walked with me in this very personal story. Opening up here was difficult, but also liberating. If this story touched you in any way, leave a like. For me, it will be like a hug, a gesture of support that warms up this little corner here. And if you want to come back for more stories like this with truth and soul, subscribe to the channel. We always leave a coffee passing by here. Let me know in the comments which city you're watching. I love to know how far these words are going, and it activates the bell, see? That way you don't lose when the coffee is brewed again. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.